I've been chasing legends most of my life, traveling highways at odd hours, trekking through remote forests, eavesdropping on townspeople's hushed confessions of what they've seen in the dark. Some call me a cryptid hunter. I don't hold illusions of heroism. I'm just a dogged soul following whispers, rumors, and secondhand glimpses of the impossible. Most hunts end in disappointment or mundane explanations, but every so often, I encounter something that changes the way I see the world. That's what happened in the cornfields of central Kansas, a region of open skies, golden fields, and, if local stories are to be believed, an unsettling phenomenon that claims unwary travelers. No wind, no storms, just footprints heading into rows of tall corn, never returning. Disappearances that remain unsolved. The few who speak of it call it the Whispering Fields. I arrived in Kansas late summer when the sun blazed overhead and the air shimmered with heat. The farmland spread out in gentle waves of green turning gold. Interstate traffic was sparse, with the occasional truck rumbling by. I turned off the main highway near a small town, barely a dot on the map. I'd heard from an acquaintance that near this town, farmland had developed a dark reputation. People vanish in that field, he warned me. No storms, no wind, but footprints lead in and never come out. At first, I suspected a sensational rumor or a tall tale, but the chatter about hush-voiced whispers, sightings of living shadows among the stalks, and the absolute hush that settles at dusk, it was enough to pique my curiosity. I swung by the local diner to glean some insight. Over burnt coffee, I asked a waitress about the rumored field. She clammed up, eyes flicking around. It took another coffee and slice of pie for her to open up a bit. "That field's trouble," she said. "My cousin went in last year. He heard something, came out white as a sheet, told everyone never to go near it. Another man didn't come out at all." She refused to elaborate. That was enough encouragement for me. That evening, I found a cheap motel, then spent hours studying the local farmland map. The field in question lay outside town, an expanse straddling a long gravel road, owned by no farmer currently. Some say the owner abandoned it decades ago, letting the corn grow wild, never harvested. Next day, near noon, I drove out to a dusty intersection. A sagging fence marked the boundary of someone's property, or used to. The land was flat, rows of corn stalks stretching endlessly, many dried to a pale gold. The wind was suspiciously still that day. Usually, Kansas breezes stirred the fields, but the corn stalks were statues, no rustle, no sway. I parked on the roadside. My boots crunched on the gravel as I approached the fence line. A weathered sign hung crookedly, unreadable from rot. A sign behind it read, "No trespassing," half buried in weeds. Typical. But ignoring it was essential to investigate. I saw the well-worn footpath that led into the rows. Faint footprints in the dusty soil. Something about them gave me chills. They vanished a few meters in, swallowed by the corn. No footprints returning. The silence pressed on me, heavy as the summer heat. I loaded my small pack: water, flashlight, voice recorder, camera, a notepad. Also a handheld GPS, my standard cryptid hunting kit. If the stories were true, I might vanish, but I always prepare. Crossing into that field was like stepping into a different world. The stalks, tall and dense, quickly blocked out the horizon. The sunlight overhead turned muted, casting a greenish-gold tint. Typically, cornfields aren't silent. Wind, insects, rustling leaves. But here, an uncanny hush ruled. Even my footsteps felt deadened, as if the soil swallowed sound. I pressed forward along a faint path. My heart pounded, and not just from the heat. The place exuded a primal, electric tension. The stalks themselves seemed to loom, as though watching. Every so often, I paused, listening. Sometimes I thought I heard a gentle rustle, but no breeze existed to cause it. I scrawled quick notes in my pad. Time, 12:40 p.m. Field is unnaturally quiet. Feels watched. The afternoon crawled on. I ventured deeper, checking my GPS. Oddly, it glitched. Coordinates froze, then changed randomly. I couldn't get a proper fix. This phenomenon was reminiscent of other hunts where electronics fail in the presence of something unexplained. Then the first whisper reached my ears. A faint, almost indecipherable murmur. My posture stiffened. I pivoted, scanning the cornrows. No movement. I inched forward, whisper recorder on. The murmur repeated, like multiple voices speaking in unison. The words were unclear, but the tone was mesmerizing, low, inviting. I advanced slowly, parting the stalks. The hush remained, aside from the whisper. Could it be the wind rustling leaves? Possibly, except no wind stirred. The whisper grew slightly louder, forming half shapes of words. I glimpsed a shape moving out of sight. Heart hammering, I fumbled for my camera. By the time I raised it, the shape was gone. Eventually, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Tracks in the dirt, human footprints. They led in deeper, exactly like the rumors. The tread suggested a pair of boots. They just ended after a few more yards. No sign of turning around, no scuff indicating a jump or struggle. They simply vanished. The ground beyond lay smooth, unbroken. Nearby, lying in the dirt, was a single hiking boot. No foot in it. Its laces undone, like the owner vanished mid-step. My skin prickled. I carefully bagged the boot in case I needed evidence. Then, from behind a cluster of stalks, I heard the whisper intensify. This time, my name. In the middle of that whisper, like 1,000 voices whispered my name. My breath caught. They shouldn't know my name. I forced myself to keep exploring. The cornrows twisted in ways that didn't quite match typical planting. Some rows branched or looped back, as if the field was rearranging. The sky overhead began to bruise with dusk. I realized I'd spent hours in the labyrinth. Checking my compass was futile. It spun lazily. At that point, turning back should have been the plan. But I was near enthralled or possessed by curiosity. This is it. This is the phenomenon. I wanted evidence. Suddenly, about 10 yards away, I saw a figure slip between stalks. A tall silhouette, unnaturally thin, with limbs that looked elongated. For a heartbeat, it resembled a human shape made of shadow. I snapped a photo. The lens caught only a blur, no definitive form. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping forward. The figure vanished. The next second, the whisper soared in volume, swirling around me like wind. Yet the stalks remained still. It was as if the field itself was speaking. Was that the presence local folks feared? Night fell swiftly, the corn gloom thickening. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam shaky with adrenaline. The field's hush turned oppressive. The whispers now sounded closer, like sibilant voices in my ear. My instinct screamed to leave, but I was lost, uncertain of the direction out. I tried forging a straight path, pushing aside stalks. Then I collided with something, a scarecrow, or so I thought at first. But as my flashlight revealed, it was a bundle of dried corn husks in vaguely human shape, bound with twine, anchored into the ground. An uncanny effigy. My heart hammered. The whisper escalated. I glimpsed movement overhead, a swirl of dark shape, too big to be a bird. My flashlight flicked upward. Nothing. Terrified, I realized the time for investigating was done. I had to escape. I turned around to backtrack. However, the path behind me had changed. The stalks formed a wall. Panicking, I tried another direction, stumbling through rows. The whisper followed, or led me. I wasn't sure. footing became treacherous. The ground felt soft, as if something beneath pulsed like a heartbeat. My mind reeled. Suddenly, the shape reappeared, directly in front of me. My flashlight caught a figure about 6 feet tall, elongated limbs, its form blending into the corn. The face was featureless, except for a mouth-like curve that parted in a silent hiss. In that hiss, I heard the fields whisper, "Come, come." My heart threatened to seize. I swung the flashlight, stepping back. K. The figure advanced with a sway, impossibly silent. I fumbled for my camera or anything. The figure's presence seemed to warp the darkness. The whisper peaked in a chorus, "You are almost home." I nearly lost it then. Summoning will, I let out a shout, pure fear. I swung a machete I'd strapped to my pack. The shape retreated, slipping among the stalks. The whispering paused, as if startled. This was my chance. I bolted, choosing a random direction, ignoring the disorientation. I crashed through row after row, losing track of time. The field felt endless, but eventually I glimpsed a faint glow in the distance. Moonlight reflecting on the dusty road, maybe. I forced my legs to keep moving. The whispering resumed, frantic, pleading, "Come back, come." The stalks parted. I burst onto the open road. Relief flooded me. My truck was a mere 100 feet away, a dark silhouette. The whisper was behind me, intensifying, hissing in hundreds of overlapping voices. "Come back. You were almost home." Shuddering, I sprinted, yanked my door open, started the engine. The headlights illuminated the corn's edge. For a split second, I saw multiple silhouettes in the rows, thin shapes, standing. Then I peeled out, dust billowing. The shapes receded, lost in the dust cloud. I drove for miles, trembling. Only after reaching the nearest town did I park in a lit gas station, catching my breath. My watch read 2 a.m. My phone had no new messages. My gear was intact. I felt numb, questioning if I'd escaped some living nightmare. Checking my camera, the few shots I'd taken were mostly blurred. One image vaguely showed an elongated figure among cornstalks, but it could be dismissed as a trick of light. I spent the night in a cheap motel, locked in, lights blazing. I scrolled through my photos on a laptop, cropping, enhancing. That fleeting shape was real enough for me, but hardly conclusive. The next day, I visited the local sheriff's department, pretending to ask about missing persons in that area. The deputy, eyes guarded, said a handful of travelers or hitchhikers disappeared near those fields over the last decade. Investigations turned up no leads. The farmland was mostly owned by a defunct corporation, left wild. The deputy shrugged. "Locals talk about haunted fields. We just call it an unsolved mystery." I thanked him. The puzzle pieces aligned. The entity or multiple entities in that field likely lured people with illusions, coaxing them home. The lost footprints were real. No survivors, aside from legends. I typed my entire experience into my cryptid journal, labeling it The Whispering Fields, Kansas. My personal conclusion? The phenomenon is some form of intelligence within the corn, a synergy of the land, or an ancient presence using illusions to claim victims. Hard to define. Possibly a cryptid, possibly something more supernatural. I debated returning to gather more evidence, but my fear overcame curiosity. Another attempt could mean permanent disappearance. The entity nearly trapped me once. I wouldn't risk another confrontation. Back on the road, heading out of Kansas, I still felt the field's presence in my thoughts. The hush, the whispers, that final chase, they linger. Occasionally, I dream of standing at the edge of those stalks, hearing "You were almost home" repeated in infinite voices. From time to time, local papers mention hikers missing. No sign of them, just footprints. I suspect that field. I suspect the whispering draws them in, but no official link is made. I share my story only in hushed circles, urging caution. Because the fields remain, the phenomenon persists. If you ever find yourself in central Kansas, driving lonely roads at dusk, and you see a tall stand of corn too silent for any wind, beware. If you step out and the hush intensifies, if you hear faint voices calling your name, do not follow. Because once you enter that labyrinth of dead silent stalks, the shapes that dwell within might not let you leave. They'll whisper sweet illusions, claim you belong to them. And if you run, well, you better hope your footsteps lead back. I consider myself lucky. My footprints got out. Others didn't. The field is still there, waiting for the next visitor who hears the quiet call. Because in those whispering fields of Kansas, ghosts don't just haunt houses, they haunt the rows of corn.